Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Super Fast Income. Christian here, and today we speak about improving our relationship with money and how to handle financial stress with our special guest, Phillip Holdsworth. Phillip's strategies will help you improve personal finance confidence. So get ready for a deep dive into creating a healthier financial mindset. Phillip, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Christian, and thank you so much for inviting me on.
Oh, a pleasure, a pleasure. So, can you give us a little bit of a backstory? Tell us a bit about how did you get into helping people with financial stress?
I've been involved in the finance industry for around 25 years, and I've worked in the investment management field, and I've also worked in the money and debt advice field. And one thing that I noticed was people's behavior or the process they went through to make decisions about money. So, in the money and debt advice world, people would find themselves in financial challenges, seek help. We would help them, and then they would go away happy people. But then I would see some of those people come back and wonder, why are you back here seeking our help again? And then in the investment management world, I noticed a difference when the market was buoyant and everybody was happy. Investment managers had time to think about and examine all the data, all the research to make good choices for their clients. But when the market was volatile, things were happening at a pace. All of a sudden, their decision-making process changed. And I saw them almost like, in some cases, following the crowd. Well, everybody else is selling or everybody else is buying, or making decisions quickly without really looking at all the in-depth research. And it caused me to wonder why these two extremes, why is this happening? What is it that we're missing that is happening in our financial world? And that's what really piqued my interest in our behavior and our relationship with money.
Yeah, money have a huge impact on people's lives and also psychology. So, can you please share a few client stories to understand better the impact of money psychology on someone's life?
Yeah, I had a client come to me who worked in quite a high-end profession. They worked in property law and worked for some quite sort of significant clients. When I say significant, I mean significant money. Interestingly, when I first met this client of mine, they earned the most among all their friends, and yet seemingly were the one always in debt. And they couldn't understand why. They tried to do all the right things, have a spending plan, save money, but for whatever reason, it just never seemed to work out their way. Until we started to look behind the scenes and look at the influences on their life right back to childhood, and the way that they behaved in certain circumstances. So there's a number of things that came to light. One was, it's a pressured job that they're in. And when the pressure was on, at the end of the day, they just wanted to feel good. And one of their ways of actually getting that buzz, that feel-good factor, was to go and spend some money. Retail therapy. And so they would go and spend money and feel good about it. The problem with that, and some of your listeners will be going, that sounds like me, is the fact that later on, then you feel guilty about spending the money, or you think, I wish I hadn't spent that money because I could have done with using it for something else. That was one of the things that came across. The other thing was, whenever they were out with their friends for a meal, for drinks, wherever it may be, in a social environment, they felt that it was important for them to put a smile on their friends' faces. So they would offer to pay the bill. So whether it's buy the meals or pay for drinks. And as they sort of opened up this story for themselves, you start to realize some of the areas that they were totally unaware of. I don't know if you know this, Christian, but in terms of our relationship with money, the decisions we make are often emotional decisions, and they'll roughly sort of 80 to 90% of those decisions are emotionally driven, and they're unconscious because our mind just doesn't want to go through all the rigmarole of examining everything. We want to quickly get past that decision. So what we tend to do is we tend to look back and think of similar circumstances, what was decided there, and very quickly just go with that decision. So it's an automatic response, a habit. And that's what my client was experiencing. So that's why they couldn't understand why they weren't saving or they weren't able to manage their spending plan, because of these unconscious behaviors. But the minute you're aware of it, now we can start to do something about it. So an example, I said to the client, when you go and on your retail therapy, you see something that you like, how about walking past it and then giving yourself a week to think about it? Now, interestingly, this client said, I couldn't possibly do that. And I said, why not? Well, what if it isn't there when I come back? And I says, but how's this going to affect your life? And all of a sudden, they had that light bulb moment where they realized it's not. And what was so wonderful was a week later, and we're talking about a professional person, a week later, they phoned me up, and it was like a child on the other end of the phone, just saying, Phil, I've done it. I've done it. I saw something I liked, and I walked past it, and I realized I didn't need it. It was a want, not a need. And so I didn't actually need it. And so that's one example. I had another client very quickly who, successful businessman, had a lot of money in the bank, didn't need to worry about that at all, dressed well, drove nice cars, went on nice holidays, and everything about this person told you they were successful. So that's what you were seeing, and the information I was given said to me this person's successful. But right in the middle of the conversation, they said to me, oh, I'm really bad with money. And I said, I'm sorry, could we just sort of look at the facts around your present circumstances? So we did, and we went through all the facts. Money in the bank, successful business, good turnover, good clientele, nice clothes, living in a nice neighborhood, able to cover all the bills. These were all the facts. And I said, in those facts, where does it tell you that you're not good with money? And I said, can you remember the first time you ever thought that? And it actually transpired that it was their father, when they were a little boy, said to them, made some critical remark about their use of money. Oh, they'll never get this. They'll never be good with money. And it's interesting for all of us, and your listeners may actually identify with this, that there are things that people have said in the past that in a way have held us back, a bit like bars in a prison cell, but actually stronger than those bars. I said to this client, so where's your father now? And he said, oh, he passed away many years ago. And yet he still believed that he was no good with money. So all this that he was doing was to try and get that affirmation to confirm that he was good with money. The trouble is, the affirmation he needed was from his father, and his father was no longer around. So you think a person's stuck there, but fortunately that wasn't the case. And it's about then, what do we do to rewrite the narrative of his thinking so that he can feel, actually, these are the facts and the facts are true, and I am actually good with money.
That's a very good point. You mentioned also the successful people. So I'm not trying to be controversial, but do you think receiving a good education is enough to be financially smart in life?
If that were the case, then we'd have a lot of happy, successful millionaires and multimillionaires and billionaires. But I see a lot of them very unhappy. So I ask the question, why? Why are you unhappy? And oftentimes you talk with them there's a lot of concern and stress and anxiety about money, even though perhaps you and I would look at them and say, what have you got to be concerned about? And so you have to ask the question, what sits behind it? And all the education in the world, which they've had, has not addressed the issue that sits behind it. And that's fear. Possibly the fear, what if I lose it all? What if the market turns and all of a sudden I'm penniless? And that's very real for many people. It's as though they're living in a world where this could happen, when in actual fact the facts around them says otherwise. But they can't see that. They see what they've conjured in their mind. So we've got to help them be able to see the reality of the situation. So education, as good as it is, and education is important, that gives us our financial literacy. Then you've got to have financial capability. How do I apply that education? But equally at the same time, we need to understand our money psychology. How do I relate to money? What are the mindsets that I hold that may or may not be holding me back or sabotaging my future aspirations? So education's good, but on its own, equates to about 10 to 20% of what we need in terms of managing our finances.
That's fascinating. So what do people need to build financial wealth? Can you give us some tips to improve our managing money?
I think certainly in terms of being in control, sat in the driver's seat, we need to have a plan. So one of the things that I would say to people is you need to be able to plan your finances month on month. You need to know what's coming in and what's going out and where it's going. So if you know where it's going, including the miscellaneous expenditure that you have throughout the month, then you can start to see patterns of behavior. Things that you automatically do, but you don't think about. It's a little bit like driving on a journey. You reach your destination, but you can't remember the journey because you've got into an automatic mode. And we do that with our finances. We do that with our decision making. Our minds are making decisions in milliseconds, and yet all we do is we see the bigger things, and we're not aware of those decisions that we're making. So to start with, we need to have a plan. However we like to do it, I use a spreadsheet, and once I've set it all up, it takes me about 15 minutes per month to actually then make any adjustments and know exactly what's going on from month to month. The other thing I need to know is, how do I relate to money? What drives my choices and behaviors? I'll give you an example. I spoke with a client of mine who was very good with their finances. They had a plan. They monitored their plan throughout the month. And I asked them, how often do you check your finances? And it started off sort of once a week, and then once a day, and then several times a day. And I said to them, I said, what are you afraid of? And they just, this individual just burst into tears. And they said, I am so stressed about my finances. And so as we talked, it transpired that this individual had an aunt. When they were young, this relative would say to them, you must save, you must save. Now, in the UK, we live in an environment where you're viewed as being good with money if you save and poor with money if you spend. I think that's terrible. And I think we shouldn't think like that at all, because everybody has their reasons for doing what they do. In this client's case, their reason was, I don't want to let my aunt down. So therefore, they found it really hard to spend money, particularly on themselves, but spend any large amounts, because all they could hear in the background was their aunt saying, you must save. And so they felt guilty, they felt ashamed, they felt like they were letting their aunt down. So knowing yourself and knowing those things and thinking, do you know what? Reality is, I'm actually managing my money well. And I'm making appropriate decisions, informed decisions, and I'm living within my means. And so that in itself will say you're good with money. What you spend your money on is entirely up to you, and we're all different. We're all unique individuals. You might save lots, I might save little, but that doesn't mean to say I'm any less or you're any better. It just means we have our reasons, our motives. And the question always is, what is our motive for doing what we do? What is our motive for making the choices that we make about our finances? And so having a plan is one thing, and it's good and proper, but understanding self, which is the biggest influencer over the decisions we make around that plan. And that's where you get some people saying, I have a plan, but for some reason it never works out. And it's because they don't understand themselves and what's driving their choices and behaviors.
I remember the first time we spoke and you introduced me to the money personalities, and you have very good with questions. So what are the questions that you use with your clients to uncover their money personalities so they can be more aware and elevate their financial future? And how can our audience use it to improve their current situation or their relationship with money?
Okay. We're talking about a thing called Money Habitudes. It's an assessment tool which is online that I use with my clients to help them understand at that point in time what their tendencies are, their behaviors are, and what that is likened to a particular personality. What are the characteristics, the traits that they automatically default to when in a situation they've got to make quick decisions? And so they're presented online with a series of statements, and they're asked to put those statements in three piles. One is "that's me" pile. The second one is "that's sometimes me" pile. And the third one is "that's not me" pile. And so once they've assigned these statements to each of these piles, and it will take maximum 10 minutes for them to do, and then start to look at the results. There's about 9 questions for each money type, and there's 6 on money personalities. And so once they've gone through this process, they can then look and see which money personality has the greatest number of statements assigned to it in the "that's me" pile. And that one would be then their dominant. So the 6 type are planning, security, giving, status, and spontaneous and carefree. Now, spontaneous and carefree may well appear on the surface to be direct opposites to planning and security. But it's amazing how much of a mix some people can have of those money personalities. And that helps them to start to the process of understanding their relationship with money. Now, we are unique individuals, but we're also adaptable. So when people say to me, "this is me," I'll say, well, that's you at that point, but we do adapt. And that's the beauty of humanity. If we didn't adapt, we wouldn't be alive today. We wouldn't have humanity on this planet today. The Ice Age would have wiped us out, or the dinosaurs, or something. But today we're here because we are adaptable. And so the thing is, we can change. And we have this thing called plasticity in the brain. So we can create new neural pathways. And every time you create a new habit or a new belief, like I say to some people, don't say that you're no good with numbers. Say, I'm good with numbers when I use a calculator. Most people will go to the shops to buy things, so they will naturally add things up and take things away and multiply and so on. So who tells them they're not good with money or not good with numbers? So once you start to look at ways in which you can rewrite the narrative around your thinking, a habit takes time to develop. But as you begin to develop it, and once it's developed, you've created new neural pathways, and it becomes intrinsic within you. It becomes a part of you. So now your default responses will be aligned with the habits that you've developed. And we can all do that. We're all capable of doing it. Sometimes we might need somebody alongside just to help us along the journey, but that's fine. There's no problem with that whatsoever. But we all have that capability.
Wow. That was a journey. Thank you so much, Philip. How can our audience stay in touch with you or keep following up with your work?
Well, they can go onto my website, which is aurumgoldltd.co.uk, and Aurum is AURUM Gold Ltd, so all one word. There is my LinkedIn profile, which is Phil Holdsworth, 2 L's for Phil. So look me up on there. It's got my contact details on there, contact details on the website. I'd be happy to hear from anybody. And if anything has really sort of piqued a person's interest on your podcast, Christian, then I would love to talk with them.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Take care, my friend.
And you take care.